Have you ever wondered what is really going on inside you when you indulge in this solitary act? We are not just talking about a physical impulse, nor about passing pleasure. Carl Jung, one of the greatest thinkers of the human psyche, believed that behind every repetitive behavior there is a symbol, a cry of the soul, a deep mechanism of the unconscious trying to express itself. What if what you call relief was actually a symptom? What if the desire that leads you to Mast rbate was not only sexual, but emotional, spiritual, even existential? In this video, you will discover Jung's symbolic, archetypal, and emotional vision of solitary desire. We go far beyond the surface, exploring what is behind the act, what it reveals about its relationship with pleasure, escape, guilt, shadow, and the very meaning of being alive. Get ready to see how this habit, so common and silent, can contain messages that your soul has been trying to send you for a long time. And yes, you never thought so. Most people believe that they Mast rbate only out of will, out of desire, out of physical necessity. That's what it seems at first glance. A biological impulse that arises, demands a response, and is satisfied. But Carl Jung invites us to look deeper. According to him, what moves us is not only the body, it is the unconscious. And the unconscious rarely acts without a symbolic motive. For Jung, desire is a raw energy. He called it libido, and he did not see it only as sexual energy, but as energy of life, of movement, of creation. When this energy is not well understood or directed, it looks for easy exits. And one of the most common is precisely the solitary search for pleasure. Fast, silent, repetitive. But what happens when this practice becomes too frequent, too automatic, unconscious? Jung would say, this is not just wish. This is escape. Escape from what? Escape from boredom. Escape from loneliness. Escape from existential emptiness. Escape from the emotional pain that still lives inside you. Escape from the fear of facing oneself. Yes, often the act of Mast rbate is a response to something that you are not consciously dealing with. It may be an unresolved feeling. It can be a built-up frustration. It may be a need for love transformed into a physical impulse. The unconscious is a master at camouflaging pain. It turns the wound into distraction. And solitary pleasure, because it is accessible and immediate, becomes the perfect escape valve. But Jung warns, everything that is done without consciousness can dominate us. And if you act automatically, repeatedly, seeking that relief, without asking yourself, why now? What brought me here? What am I trying to avoid? Then perhaps the problem is not in the act itself, but in the absence of inner listening. The body asks, but is it just the body? Does this impulse really come from the flesh? Or does it come from the tired mind? From the lonely heart? Of the soul that screams? Jung saw sexuality as a powerful mirror. It reveals what is hidden, it shows the relationship we have with ourselves. And a repetitive practice of self-stimulation, with no real connection with affection, with the other or with one's own being, can reveal a deep emotional disconnection. We're not here to tell you that masturbating is wrong. What Jung proposes is another path, that of consciousness. The problem is not in the act. It's in what you don't want to feel when you do. It's in the emotional hole that you try to plug with quick pleasure. It's in the silence you dread hearing if you don't have that kind of discharge. How many times have you sought this pleasure not out of genuine desire, but out of anxiety? Out of frustration? By need? For fear of facing reality? That's the point. Jung said that the unconscious does not act by chance. He expresses himself. He screams. And what you think is just a physical behavior may be symbolic language from your unconscious saying, hey, something in you is hurting. Look at me. But you don't look. You open a website. You close your eyes. You relieve yourself and go back to ignoring the call. And this is accumulating. Energy that could be used to create, to transform, to evolve, is being diverted every day to plug an emotional hole that continues to grow. And what's the problem with that? It's just that you become dependent, not of pleasure, but of escape. You begin to associate emotional tension with physical relief. And this association shapes their internal paths. Every time you feel frustration, anger, sadness, The body reacts by asking for pleasure, but not because he needs to, because you taught him that this is the fastest way to escape. And when he realizes he is arrested, trapped in a cycle that doesn't feed your soul, doesn't strengthen your self-esteem, doesn't solve your pain, and the worst, that you hide from yourself what is really happening inside. Jung believed that the first step to freedom is consciousness. It's not stopping everything. It is not to repress oneself. It is to look sincerely at what you are seeking through that pleasure. Are you touching yourself because you want to connect with your own body? Or are you trying to escape the anguish of not feeling loved, seen, wanted? Is it really desire? Or is it a poorly expressed need? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are the ones who bring lucidity. And only lucidity can break the cycle. Carl Jung did not condemn desire, but he reminded us that every desire contains a symbol, and that ignoring this symbol is wasting the chance for inner transformation. Maybe what you seek so often, not pleasure, be welcoming. Maybe what you're trying to calm down, don't be your body, be your soul asking for help. And you never thought so, did you? Have you ever wondered why your body seems to ask for this relief in times when you're emotionally shaken? Why, even without direct stimulation, does craving appear just when you're bored, stressed, lonely, or emotionally vulnerable? Carl Jung would say that this is no coincidence. For him, the body is an extension of the soul. And often, when the soul is not heard, the body begins to scream for it. This cry does not come in the form of words. It comes as an impulse, as a compulsion, as urgency. It comes as a physical desire that, in fact, hides an emotional cry for help. Jung believed that the psyche, what you are inside, constantly seeks to balance itself. And when there is repressed pain, unexpressed feelings, unrecognized needs, the unconscious finds alternative ways to process this content. And one of the fastest and most accessible ways out is precisely sexuality. The physical pleasure is immediate. It produces dopamine, relieves tension, and for a few moments gives the feeling of completeness. But this relief is temporary. And when the act ends, what was stored comes back. And he comes back stronger. The body then learns that it can momentarily release this emotional discomfort through masturbation. But this becomes a cycle. And what was just an occasional resource turns into an automatic response to any internal discomfort. We are not talking here about vice in the moral sense. We are talking about an unconscious pattern of coping with pain. Do you feel empty? It seeks pleasure. Do you feel anxious? It seeks pleasure. Do you feel lonely? It seeks pleasure. And that's because, on some deep level, you've learned that it's easier to shut up your soul with your body than to face what you really feel. Jung called this the displacement of the libido. That is, instead of using your energy to look inside, understand your feelings, build real effective connections, you shift this energy to a quick pleasure, which diverts your attention from what is really happening. It's as if every time you touch yourself, you say, "I don't want to hear that right now." But the soul keeps talking. She speaks through the sadness that persists, through the emptiness that returns, through the guilt that arises afterwards, through the feeling of emotional fatigue even after a moment of physical pleasure. The body screams what the soul silences. And as long as you do not listen to what is being silenced, you will continue to try to anesthetize with pleasure what can only be cured with awareness. Jung said that what you avoid looking inside yourself does not disappear. He called it shadow. The shadow is the set of everything you don't want to see in yourself. Your fears, your needs, your pains, your traumas, your repressed desires. And the shadow, when ignored, finds indirect ways to express itself. It appears in dreams, in impulses, in destructive relationships. And yes, it can also show up in excessive masturbation. The problem is not in the act. It's in the emotional use you're making of it. Are you using pleasure as a bridge to yourself? Or as an escape from oneself? Are you welcoming your body with presence and love? Or is he using his body to escape his mind? These questions seem simple, but they change everything. Because when you start to realize that your body is a messenger, not an enemy, everything changes. You stop treating it as a storehouse of tensions. And he begins to treat him as the ally that he is, a direct conduit between you and what is stored in your soul. The next time the impulse strikes, try to stop. Notice how you are feeling at that moment. Are you okay? Or are you sad? Are you at peace? Or are you distressed? Do you have real desire? Or are you just trying to distract yourself? This pause between impulse and action is where consciousness is born, and where the healing begins. Carl Jung believed that true transformation happens when you integrate what was unconscious. And if you have been using your body to silence your soul, it may be time to reverse this path. To begin to listen to the soul through the signals of the body. The desire is natural. Masturbation can be healthy, but when it becomes a crutch to avoid what needs to be felt, looked at, and understood, it turns into a muffled scream. And the more you stifle, the louder the body screams. Before the silence of the soul turns into a noise that dominates everything. At first, it seems just an intimate moment. A reserved space where no one sees, no one judges, no one interferes. It's you with yourself. An act of pleasure that seems harmless, even necessary. But as time goes by, something begins to change. What was a choice becomes routine. What was freedom becomes compulsion. And without realizing it, you start to feel less in control. Carl Jung would call this prison disguised as pleasure. He didn't believe in addictions just as bad habits. For Jung, compulsion is a symptom of the fragmented soul. It is a sign that there is an internal conflict, a division within the individual that has not yet been integrated. And the automatic repetition of physical pleasure, especially when it's used as an escape, indicates that there's a part of you trying to solve something that the conscious mind is ignoring. But how can pleasure, something so natural, become a prison? It is when it ceases to be a choice and becomes a necessity. When you no longer seek pleasure because you want to, but because you need to. Because if you don't have it, you feel irritation, anxiety, frustration. And this reveals dependence. Not the pleasure itself, but what it represents to your mind, an immediate relief from the pain you don't want to face. You begin to notice this arrest when, even after the act, you feel a strange sensation. It is not moral guilt. It is empty. It's as if what should fill you, to empty you even more. This is the key, when pleasure stops nourishing and starts to drain. Jung would say that, at this point, your psychic energy is being captured by a behavior that is taking you away from your own individuation, that is, from your process of becoming who you really are. The energy that could be used to create, to love, to reflect, to build. It is being consumed by a cycle that, in the end, does not transform you. It only anesthetizes you. And that's how the prison is being built. Block by block, in silence. Because no one sees. Nobody notices. Only you. But even you start denying it. To be rationalized. Telling himself that everything is fine. Which is normal. That everyone does. And yes, everyone does. But not everyone loses themselves in the process. When pleasure overwhelms you, it becomes an invisible tyrant. One who doesn't scream, doesn't force, just whispers, "It's just one more time." And this "just one more time" is repeated every day. Until you don't even know if you have a choice anymore. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious will always try to free you. Even if for that, he needs to make you sick. It will send you disturbing dreams, more intense urges, emotional discomforts, identity crises, all to remind you that you are living a life disconnected from your center. And yes, excessive masturbation can be one of the signs of this disconnection. The body is not the problem. Neither is pleasure. The problem is the invisible prison that forms when you no longer know what you are really looking for. Maybe you're not looking for sex. Maybe you're looking for meaning. But as a meaning, it requires depth, time, presence. You choose pleasure fast. And it is at this point that freedom becomes an illusion. You feel free because you can pleasure yourself at any time. But in fact, you are hostage to a pattern that prevents you from accessing deeper layers of your soul. Because when you get used to the shallow, the deep is frightening. The royal touch is scary. The true encounter with the other, and with oneself, is frightening. You avoid it. And while he avoids it, he remains in prison. But there is a way out. And Jung pointed to it: consciousness. Consciousness breaks the cycle, gives back the power of choice. It brings light to the shadow. When you start honestly asking yourself what's behind your impulse, not once or twice, but always, something inside you changes. You begin to regain mastery of your own energy. He begins to realize that he does not need to be commanded by a habit. That pleasure can be reconnected with affection, with care, with the soul. And that you are much more than your desire. You were not born to be a prisoner of your own body. You were born to inhabit yourself with wholeness. And that starts with a simple step, recognizing when pleasure has become a prison, and have the courage to get out of it. Carl Jung stated that each of us carries a shadow within us, a hidden, unconscious side that brings together everything we deny, repress, or fear in ourselves. The shadow is not evil by nature. It is simply what you have not yet wanted or have not been able to look at in the face. And here's something important. The more you ignore the shadow, the more it controls you. But what does this have to do with masturbation? Everything. Many people believe that they are in control of their desires. They believe that the act of Mast rbate at ourself is purely conscious, rational, healthy. But according to Jung, if this behavior is repeated frequently, automatically, and emotionally disconnected, it may be being fed by the shadow. The shadow, in this case, can contain repressed anger, deep neediness, fear of intimacy, shame of one's own body, religious guilt, old traumas. And without realizing it, you turn pleasure into an outlet for this pent-up emotional charge. You think you're relieving yourself, but you're actually reinforcing the pact with the part of you that still lives in the dark. Masturbation ceases to be an act of care and becomes an unconscious way of feeding what you hide. Let's think together. Do you touch yourself in the moments when you are at peace? Or in the moments when you are anxious, bored, frustrated? Do you really feel pleasure? Or do you feel only relief, followed by a certain emptiness? Automatic repetition, when not accompanied by awareness, strengthens the shadow. It keeps you stuck in a cycle where you don't understand the source of the impulse, you just respond to it. And so, desire becomes a symptom. Jung said that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it destiny. This is what happens when you don't recognize the shadow that is behind your repetitive acts. You think it's just your routine, but in fact, it is your unconscious trying to show you a pain that you have not yet accepted. The shadow may be linked to a distorted image of love. Perhaps you learned early on that you were not worthy of affection, and so he learned to comfort himself on his own, not just physically, but emotionally. Maybe you carry shame. Shame on your body. Shame of desire. Shame on your story. And he uses pleasure as a silent way to punish himself. Yes, punish. Because masturbation is not always about pleasure. Sometimes it's about self-denial. About confirming the belief that you are alone. That you are not worthy of connection. That the pleasure you seek will never come through the other, because you don't deserve it. And all that, it is shadow. But Jung also said that the shadow does not have to be an enemy. Within, and should be integrated. Integrating the shadow means welcoming its wounded parts. It means looking at desire with maturity. It means transforming solitary pleasure into self-knowledge, and not into self-sabotage. It means asking, what in me is still hidden? What does my impulse want to show me? What pain have I avoided feeling? These questions pave the way. They illuminate the dark. And little by little, you stop feeding the shadow and begins to transform it. You realize that the act doesn't have to go away, but it can take on new meaning. It can stop being an automatic behavior and become a moment of presence, of reconnection, of truth. There is no need for guilt. Guilt also comes from the shadow, from repression, from shame, from moral rigidity. Jung teaches us that repression and indulgence are two equally dangerous extremes. The middle way is consciousness. It's you being able to feel desire and understand its origin. It's you being able to touch yourself and understand if this comes from love or escape. It's you being able to stop and not feel hostage to the impulse. When you start to brighten the shadow, it loses strength. She stops screaming. It stops infiltrating your choices. And you begin, little by little, to regain your inner freedom. The shadow does not disappear, but stop being a tyrant and becomes a silent counselor. It shows you where there is still a wound. and therefore it is valuable. But to listen to what she has to say, you need to stop. Observe, reflect, feel. And this is what Jung proposes. A path of return to oneself, through the symbol, the listening, the truth. You can keep masturbating, but let this be a gesture of love, not forgetfulness. A gesture of presence, not escape. A gesture of light, not shadow. Carl Jung said that desire, when ignored or misunderstood, turns into obsession. But when listened to, respected, and integrated, it becomes creative energy and deep awareness. Have you ever stopped to think about it? What do you do with your desire? It says more about your soul than you might think. It is not a matter of judging desire. He is natural. He is human. It is part of life. But it's about understanding how you deal with it. If you feed it in a hurry, with guilt, with escape, or if you observe it with presence, with respect, with truth. The way you relate to your own pleasure shows how you relate to your own vital energy. It shows if you are using this force to hide or to transform yourself. Many people live as if desire were an enemy to be overcome. Repress. Deny. Others live as if desire were an absolute master. They follow it blindly, without question, as if the impulse always knew what is best. But Jung invites us to a third path. The path of listening. From deep listening to what desire is trying to teach you. You can use this force to trap yourself in endless cycles, or you can use it as fuel to create, to awaken, to evolve. You can use desire as a substitute for presence, or you can use presence to transform desire into wisdom. The choice is yours. Have you ever noticed that when you are more connected with your essence, your impulse gets organized? It doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. It becomes curiosity, inspiration, creative movement, real connection. Jung saw this clearly. For him, mischanneled desire could become a dangerous field of neurotic repetitions. But desire, properly understood, was a gateway to the soul. And you, what have you done with your desire? He has used it to forget his pain, or to get closer to them. It has turned it into moments of escape, or in moments of reconnection. He has treated his body like a machine, or as a temple. All of this says a lot about your relationship with yourself, Mesmo. Calm your past with your self-esteem, with your inner energy. The solitary act itself is not the problem. The problem is when it becomes the only place where you feel seen, where you feel control, where you find peace. Because this peace is not true. It is a momentary truce. True peace comes when you look within and say, I understand what I'm feeling. I know what I'm looking for. And I choose not to abandon myself. This is the real transformation. When pleasure stops being compulsive and becomes conscious. When desire ceases to be a burden and becomes a bridge. When you stop acting automatically and starts to act with intention. And that doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require you to ever touch yourself again. It doesn't require you to blame or repress yourself. It only requires honesty. The honesty of recognizing that desire is part of you, but that he no longer needs to command you. You can sit, breathe, and listen to it. Ask him what he wants, what he needs. What is he trying to tell you? And little by little, you will realize. Desire is not the enemy. The escape is. Desire is only a messenger. And when you listen with courage, it ceases to be a symptom, and it turns into wisdom. Carl Jung teaches us that everything that is lived with consciousness is transformed. And now that you've seen what really happens when you Mast rbate, now that you've seen what you've never seen before, maybe it's time to do it differently. Not because you need to repress yourself, but because you deserve to know yourself. And the desire, it is one of the most powerful ways to do so.